Today we're going to be talking about trees. I know, everybody loves trees, everybody has trees, but a tree in your septic system, not a great idea, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. Before we get into that though, we have to discuss a little bit about what is a septic system and how are they designed. As we've discussed many times on this channel, a septic tank is very simple in nature. Now, they can get complicated, but a lot of times they're not. A majority of the time, you're going to see that a tank is just a big concrete box. No bells and whistles, no pumps, no blowers. There are some systems that have that, but 9 out of 10, it's usually all gravity fed, anaerobic. When you have your system installed, most commonly you're going to see a minimum of one access point to the surface, but on older houses, a lot of times that surface access did not exist, meaning you would have to find the tank, dig the tank up, and open it in order to pump it and maintain the system. When you bury a system, it's oftentimes pretty difficult to find because you have to know where to start digging in order to get to the lid. The tank, its only job is to capture solids. From the time you flush that toilet to the time it gets to the tank, it's gonna separate everything out so a clear liquid's going off into your drain field. The lids on a tank is usually about one in the front, one in the back, and a big one in the middle. On older systems, sometimes you would have it where it would be one big one in the front and one big one on the back. Modern systems will usually have a manhole riser front and back so that we can properly and effectively pump the system. When you're looking for a tank without a lid at the surface though, you gotta have a metal detector or a probe, or sometimes when you have an old house, a marker like a tree. Yes, it may sound weird, it may sound silly, but people used to mark their septic systems with trees. Kind of a silly idea, but it happened quite a bit. So much so that a lot of trees ended up growing to this size and causing some problems in the tank. As you're probably aware, the problems that can happen with the tank is the roots, right? Tree roots end up getting everywhere. Tree roots, especially for a large tree such as this, they will go all over the ground, and it only takes one little tiny strand to get into your tank, causing a problem. Remember, the tank is just a big concrete box. So you have a pipe coming in, the tank, and a pipe going out. If you have a tree over top of the tank and those roots work their way in there, because the lids aren't sealed to the tank, they're just sat right on top. Most commonly they have a bevel, so that way, it doesn't fall into the hole. But you're gonna have the lid just sat right on top of the concrete. So if you have a big tree like this with little tiny roots, those roots can work their way into the tank through the lid. Also, where the pipe comes into the tank, there's a hole cut in the concrete so that way the pipe can fit in. A lot of times you'll see people put some kind of gasket or hydraulic cement around the pipe, but sometimes on older systems, they didn't. And when you let roots start growing into the system, what do you think's gonna happen? Those roots are gonna get into the pipe and cause a problem, such as a clog. Clogs are not fun. Essentially what'll happen, as we all know, is if you don't allow the water to flow out and into the tank, it's gonna build up some pressure, and water's gonna go where the path of least resistance is, your basement toilet, or could also be in your kitchen sink, depending on how your house is situated. If you have roots, there are some chemical treatments you can use, but physically removing the root source and physically removing the roots is the most ideal way of dealing with roots in your sewer system. Simply removing the roots is not going to effectively solve your problem forever. You have to get rid of the root source. I know we're talking about septic systems, but the same problem occurs on public sewers quite a bit. The problem with public sewers is that unless you're actively looking at it, which most homeowners don't do unless they have a problem or they're selling the house, you're not going to know you have a problem until it's too late. With a septic system, usually you're going to have somebody looking at the system every couple years, and they'll be able to let you know when something like this is starting to cause a problem. If you're on public sewer, it'd be a really good idea to pop that clean out in your basement open, send the camera through, and just make sure nothing's happening inside of that line. If you're on public sewer and you know that you have a bunch of trees over top of the system, you're probably gonna end up with roots getting in there. I had a customer not too long ago where they kept hearing some noises and the basement toilet would periodically back up, especially when they had friends and family over. We investigated the sewer line. Now, this house is from 1955, so it's a pretty old system. Back in that time period, they weren't using plastic pipe. They were using terracotta and cast iron pipe. Both of these pipe materials are perfectly fine, but they do have a problem, and that's usually with how they're joined together. Cast iron piping was generally joined together using lead and oakum, and terracotta a lot of times was just slid right into the bell shape. It didn't usually have a seal or some kind of gasket to hold the pipe together. So the problem is that you could end up having roots, especially little tiny roots, work their way in between the gaps of the pipes, not the pipe itself. So in this particular circumstance, this homeowner had a whole row of trees over top of his sewer line. And what happened was those roots over the course of 50 years worked their way into the line and eventually started catching enough toilet paper and human waste to where now he actually had a problem. I would argue usually sewer lines for public municipal is where you're going to see most of your root problems. Septic systems, yeah, you'll see it, but it's not often that people plant a tree over top the tank. In that particular situation with this homeowner that was on sewer, essentially we'll show you the pipe and how it looks. So now let's continue talking about what happens when you put a tank over top of a septic system. When we look at this particular one, we're going to see that there's going to be a cleanout, which is that white pipe, and a tree very close to it. Now, the problem that we have with that tree being as large as it is, that means that trees had plenty of time to grow. As it grows, those roots will continue to grow with it and work their way into the tank. Just like with the sewer line that we looked at a minute ago, those roots can get in there and cause all sorts of havoc, mostly backing up into your home. So the lesson behind all of this is if you're going to plant trees, or if you have trees on the property, it's a good idea to go ahead, run the camera through the sewer line, make sure no roots are in the sewer line, and make sure you know where your septic system components are prior to planting any kind of trees. If you plan to do an orchard, a privacy fence, anything to that effect, you're going to run into some problems. Even if you have a small tree with very little growth next to the cleanout, it will eventually become a large tree, which will eventually cause problems. So as you see here, we have a tree, not super large, probably about 2-inch diameter branch, and it's right next to the cleanout of the tank. If you let this thing get any larger, what'll end up happening is those roots will work into the sewer line or into the tank and cause a backup. So make sure you're not putting trees over your sewer line or your septic system, so that way you can avoid all sorts of those unwanted problems, especially sewage in your basement. Sewage in your basement's not a fun time. I'm sure you've probably heard horror stories. As you can see, it's starting to rain, so I think it's probably best that we go ahead and start wrapping this one up, because we don't want to get too wet and we want to finish this particular job. If you found this useful or informative, hit that like button, leave a comment below. Do you have a tree over top of your septic system? Have you ever looked inside of your sewer line? Do you know what's going on in there? If so, share your story. I'm sure somebody wants to hear it. But I have videos posted every day on the world of well and septic, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.